Welcome everyone to this session on how to reboot growth through cluster. I see everyone is connecting to this session after the opening. My name is Patricia Valdenebro. I'm the CEO at TCI Network, and I will be the moderator today of two live talks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. I'm very glad to see that 500 delegates from more than 50 countries have signed up for this matchmaking event. Thank you all for connecting in your different time slots around the world. We know that a full day in a cluster agenda is a lot, so we need to deliver a lot. But first, I want to thank our members out there for approaching the TCI network to join forces in this cluster-to-cluster matchmaking event 2021. Building global connections is one of our strengths in the TCI network, and we are very glad to open new platforms like this that allow us to foster global connections. It is also great that we can follow the path started some years ago by Cluster Excellence Denmark, the pioneers who have organized quite a saga of cluster matchmaking events, where probably many of you have already taken part. And we are glad to see that the format continues generating so much interest. And to me, the key of this interest is that the global matchmaking gives us the opportunity to connect in a very effective way with like-minded partners, with cluster people that work with a collaborative mindset and approach, and where we know that the conversations that we start today will have more chances to turn into a successful collaboration. So I wish you all great conversations with a purpose. Following Meret's initial set of ideas about rebooting growth, now we start a live talk on how to reboot growth specifically through clusters, how to do it through clusters. And to me today, two cluster experts, let me introduce them. David Fernández is member of the coordination team of the Basque Cluster Program at SPRI, the Basque Business Development Agency. David has a long experience in different roles in supporting cluster development, from enabling trade and technology missions and being the cluster policy link in 5 different cluster organizations, to reviewing and implementing the Basque cluster policy. He's also a cluster benchmarking expert, a mentor in cluster policy, an advisor at EU level, and a regular contributor whenever we ask him to. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining us. David, you are muted. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Patricia.
Welcome.
Yeah.
And Sauro Vicini is the cluster manager at the health cluster in Emilia-Romagna. He's a computer scientist working in the health sector. I can presume this brings an interesting mix of competences to your work at the cluster. Sauro has worked in the top-ranked research center in healthcare in Italy, the San Raffaele Hospital in Milan, working in topics such as Internet of Things, e-health, cloud computing, robotics, privacy and data security, mobile technologies, wearable sensors, and personal health system. And he has also been involved in the development of Lombardia region's smart specialization strategy. And as researcher, he has collaborated in many European projects. Welcome, Sauro. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you to you. Hi.
Hi. Well, how are we going to organize this session? I will first ask David and Sauro to make a short introduction of the cluster and the cluster program. And then I will make them 3 questions to start the conversation. But since we want this to be a live talk, I kindly encourage you participants to make use of the features that this wonderful tool called Zoom offers us. One is the Q&A function. Please post there your questions to the panelists. And there is also a chat function where you can make comments, share references or tips related to the topic. And I will try to intercalate all this in the conversation with the speakers. And my colleague, Jon Oroñon, is helping me to organize this part. I hand over to David Fernández for his introduction on the Basque cluster program. David.
Thank you. Okay, are you?
You can share now your presentation.
Yes, it's okay?
Exactly, okay. Perfect. That's it.
Okay. Well, first, I would like to introduce about the scenario that we have lived in these past 2 years. And first, I would mention the effects of COVID-19 pandemics. As all of us know, first, there was a strong restriction on people's mobility, also some disruptions on supply chain. Another topic that we could introduce later is the consequences of this on the possibility of onshoring or reshoring. And finally, a market demand downturn. And in that context, let us remember that by the end of 2019, the European Commission presented the European Green Deal with the aim of achieving climate neutrality by 2050. In March 2020, the European Union Industrial Strategy was presented, focused mainly on digitalization and greenification or ecological transition. And it was just one day before the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a global pandemic. This industrial strategy was later updated in May 2021 by adding the learnings of these pandemics and introducing some other elements like looking for more resiliency, trying to diminish dependencies on external supply for certain sectors. And well, on the other hand, accelerating the digital and the green transitions. Mm-hmm. And finally, the Horizon Europe, which is the framework funding program for R&D in Europe, was presented in March 2021, addressing global challenges and at the same time, European Union competitiveness, global competitiveness for our industries. In that context, in a more local context, in November 2020, the Basque government presented the Basque Science, Technology and Innovation Plan that is based on a triple transition: energy, climatic, technological, digital, and socio-sanitary. And how are our cluster organizations contributing in this scenario? Well, first, we have seen even more than before, cluster organizations as allies of the government with a pivotal role. First, in a quick crisis response, and later on a strategic reflection to draft reactivation roadmaps for all of our clusters. They have also been engaged, for instance, in contrast workshops to develop the new climate change and energy transition law, the Basque law for climate change and energy transition, and some other interactions with our government. And on the other hand, they have been, again, transformation agents in those transformation and transitions that we were mentioning. Regarding ecological transition, they have been engaged in different projects, most of them cross-cluster project related with the circular economy or the creation of a waste valorization center or decarbonization initiative for industries. And regarding digital transition, well, we have seen first regarding those cluster organizations more focused on manufacturing, that they have been working on Industry 4.0, servitization, and new business models related to this remote operation possibilities. And those clusters that have more to do with territory, they have been also introducing, for instance, business information modeling or digital commerce solutions and other digitalization tools. Moreover, we have a Bind 4.0 acceleration program that we started some 4 or 5 years ago, and initially was working with the manufacturing, energy, health, and food clusters to engage startups with anchor companies or large companies in order to accelerate and to scale up those startups. More recently, we have widened this initiative with the pilot programs to engage these startups also to SMEs in order to accelerate digitalization of SMEs. And we have started with a pilot program with the automotive, clean tech, and energy clusters. And finally, they have had a very important role in internationalization, switching to virtual mode. Trade missions or exhibitions that were almost completely stopped during the pandemics, in some cases have been switched to this virtual mode with very successful cases. For instance, engaging 1,080 visitors for a virtual fair that was organized by a cluster organization with the 28 SMEs taking part and 1,080 visitors from 23 countries. And well, this is all for my part. Thank you very much, and I look forward for the discussion.
Thank you, David, for this introduction to the framework of how you work and how the clusters are bringing value in the Basque Country. Now let's go to Emilia Romagna, the health sector, and Sauro, who will introduce us about the cluster life those days.
Yeah, I try to share my presentation. That is very fast because I have just, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll be very fast in interact myself because, of course, I see a lot of attendees and I think they are most from cluster organizations. So I don't want to bother you about why we are here and present the cluster, but I would just mention that, yeah, well, of course, we are a cluster organization with 92 members. We are a quadruple association because we have companies, research, the public sector, and we introduce also the possibility to join us also from patient association that represent, in our case, the let's say the end user of medical product. And yeah, we know a lot of cluster in Europe because we collaborate with them in some SPRI partnership, like the one on MedTech, on personalized medicine, and the new one on wireless ICT. I would like just to mention the activity that we made last year because, like everyone, we were involved in helping our region in the COVID pandemic. Of course, we in Emilia-Romagna we have this strong aspect, I think, because we are a cluster ecosystem, let's say. So we are 8 clusters promoted by the region with a strong commitment by the region. We are quite well organized, collaborating in let's say cross cluster in the region. I mean, in some cross activity among cluster organization in the different sector. So this is one of the point that I would like to remark because this helped us in the past to to join forces against coronavirus. So this was one of the most important activity that we made last year. And last year, of course, we spent a lot of time in rethinking the policy, because everybody is doing this. Was the year for the new S3 strategies from the 2021 to 2027. So the contribution from our, let's say, our network, our members, was exactly related to how the let's say the healthcare system as a whole, I mean hospitals and companies and a research center can collaborate together in addressing new policy. Of course, we made activities from startups, from internationalization in virtual way, and I think we are also in let's say in a new position to understand how we can better collaborate in the future. So this, I think, is one of the thing that we learned in the last year.
Thank you, Sauro. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Let's go with the first question. It has to do with this how the clusters are contributing to reboot growth. I was listening yesterday to Jeffrey Sachs on the launch of the Sustainable Development Report of the United Nations, and he mentioned it was not only going back better or building back better, but building forward better. And I would like to emphasize this moving forward. What new elements do you think are guiding the current cluster strategy to move forward better? And what are the challenges also ahead that you are facing to implement these new strategies? Who wants to start, Sauro or David?
Please, David.
David, please go.
Well, first, I think the fact that the pandemic is indeed a global challenge as well has made us to work more intensely together, because addressing this global challenge, similarly to addressing the challenges drafting, for instance, the Agenda 2030 requires joining efforts. So this has been a good exercise to put in place very intensely this coordinated and joint efforts across cluster, but also with a strong implication and commitment with the regional strategies and with the government.
Thank you, David. And Sauro, how about you?
Oh yeah, I remember when we start to work in the new S3 strategy last year, before the COVID pandemic, I think, and I remember that the starting point was the cohesion policy of the European Commission, where they want a smarter Europe, a greener Europe, a connected, social, and closer to citizen Europe. I mean. And I remember we discussed a lot in our cluster why health is no more like a priority in this policy. And unfortunately, after the COVID pandemic, health is now is become again a priority on the European agenda. But what I would like to say is that we need to thinking about the impact of the innovation in the other sectors. So in this way, I think that the new element is exactly the cross-sectoral collaboration, because we need to think that when we made something, we have impact in this specific sector, but also in other sectors. So what I would like to push in our next activity is exactly the fact that we have to work with other sector, not only the health, in my case, I mean, not only the collaboration among companies and research center from the health sector, but we need to think about cross collaboration, because the new challenges are more complex than the one that we met before. And then we need to think together, combining expertise coming from different sectors and considering the impact on the different sector that every innovation will have, let's say.
Yeah, you mentioned this cross-cluster collaboration. We have listened to this for a long time. Now it's like more urgent in the agenda. How can this cross-cluster collaboration can be pushed, and what new opportunities arise for clusters? What is your view from your conversations with the bus clusters, David?
Well, first, I would also like to point out that regarding, for instance, the United Nations SDGs, they have bring a fundamental change from the previous millennium goals, in the sense that now the SDGs put the focus or put a big focus on the private sector, and the challenges or the goals are not anymore just a call for states or governments to act. It's also in the form of challenges to solve. It's a call for the private sector to act. And also there is this new vision of translating these challenges, social, environmental, and economic challenges, into opportunities for value creation and for business generation.
Yeah, thank you, David and Sauro.
Oh, I can tell you about just an experience that I had just 1 week ago, because I was invited to have a talk about the contribution of the motorsport sector to the healthcare. I was a bit scared about, I was a bit confused about what I can say about this. But if you try to just to Google it, you can find a lot of examples of the contribution of this, let's say, innovative sector to the healthcare one, and also the vice versa. So there's a lot of examples, for example, in composite material for prosthetics, in 3D printing, in fighting the pandemic. They was very flexible to adapt and to react, changing the manufacturing of some specific products, and helping the health companies, let's say, in producing more devices and helping to fight the pandemic. So and this is just an example. I would like to say that we have the possibility. We need just we have to promote, I think, this cross collaboration, because I think it's on the air. There's something that is quite easy, because in the universities and in the research center, you now see that combining competencies can give us a new innovation and new products. So I think there's also unexpected collaboration that we can address, and I think this could be also the role of the cluster policy in the upcoming year, let's say.
David, you wanted to add something, or?
Just well, maybe we have mentioned it already, but these transitions and these transformation paths that we are talking about are very transversal. They involve usually all clusters in our economies. In some cases, the clusters are mainly technology suppliers or equipment suppliers. In some other cases, they're also like users or beneficiaries from this. For instance, if we talk about environment or green transition, all of the clusters are engaged in that sense. So this transversality creates an opportunity for all to work and to work together, as Sauro said.
Thank you, David. Please, I encourage you to make questions to the panelists, to David, Fernández, and to Sauro, Vicini, through the Q&A. And you can also make comments if you agree, if you see it like that in your regions, if you have some other examples or references, please share with us. And meanwhile, I go with my next question. It's about internationalization. And here I'm sure that many of our participants today are looking for international collections. The life of the international departments of clusters has changed a lot in the last 2 years. Internationalization is now taking very different shapes. What can you remark from what new forms of internationalization are emerging for clusters, if there are? Maybe we are just going virtual, but doing the same things. Or and also, how can clusters take advantage of the new global dynamics? Yeah, David.
Well, I think that these tools for virtual meeting and remote operation and so on were already in place. But the COVID and the pandemics has accelerated the acquisition and incorporation of these new tools and technologies to allow for this remote and virtual interaction. So we have seen, for instance, clusters with in advanced manufacturing or machining sector that usually for the starting up of a new machine or a production line usually had a team going abroad to the customer to put the machine in operation, and suddenly they could not do it, but they have managed to do it remotely, and now they have realized that this is an opportunity as an added value and a new service. This possibility of interact in a very precise way with their customers, not just in the commercial or promotional activities like a virtual trade fair or whatever, but even in delivering maintenance or technical support services remote. And this has at the same time opened the discussion on the possibilities of servitization. And I think this has been a very positive outcome. And probably we are now in a new stage where we're going to see hybrid models of interaction with the in-person interaction, but also virtual. Because
Absolutely.
interaction is not the same through the screen. But this has been an opportunity, this remote operational possibilities.
Thank you, David. Sauro, how about you?
Oh, yes, internationalization is something that we think a lot. And I think that there are, when I think about internationalization, I think recently to three elements. The first one is, like David said, that we learn to work remotely. Yeah, those kind of tools were already in place, but we now understood that moving idea is faster than moving legs or airplane. Let's say legs is good to move legs because physical exercise, but we learned that is often we can we can discuss and exchange idea in this way, and is very efficient. I mean, we understand that we can also create some competence center almost everywhere. We don't need some kind of particular infrastructure in order to work with a people that have some competences on a specific sector, and this is an important lesson, I think. The second one is always related to the fact that the real value chain are not local. I mean, they are at least European. When I have a partner that has a specific competence on a niche sector, let's say, I'm thinking about regenerative medicine in my case, they don't want to work with the closer company, but with the best one. So they want to work, if the competence is in France, in Germany, everywhere in Europe, they want to work with them. So I think that clusters, there are some virtual clusters that are not the cluster in the sense that we are thinking about at this moment, that are a new way to think about cluster organization. So we want to address the fact that we need to create this group of excellences that are able to boost the innovation in a specific sector. But by the way, I think that we also have to think about regional policy, because a region, a specific region, want to let's say improve the economic aspect, the labor aspects of their territory. So we need to match this kind of elements in order to address how a regional policy can help the cities to improve the quality of the life of the cities and the economic development in this specific territory, but enabling the collaboration among the excellences that we have in this specific territory with excellence that we have in another region in Europe and in the world, of course, because I think this is the key. So think about the quality of life of citizens and how to improve the economic value of the territory, but enabling the collaboration with the people and the companies and the research organization that have the capacity to work on a specific sector.
Thank you, Sauro. Well, the Q&A function is now starting to post very interesting questions. The first one, David, I pose it to you. Which strategy would you recommend to connect with potential international markets, especially between Latin America and the European cluster community?
Well, usually cluster-to-cluster collaboration is a way to allow for this exchange, which has proven quite useful. In the European Union, we have the ESCPs, the European Strategic Cluster Partnerships for Internationalization, that have also been a very interesting tool for engaging clusters from the European Union with clusters and partners from other countries in Latin America and also in Asia and other continents as well.
Excellent. Sauro, any recommendation about this?
Oh yeah, I don't know quite well the Latin American market, but we are involved, of course, in other market, in other yeah, of course, there's some implication in the let's say in working with this kind of tools. So we are thinking now also to some way to address, for example, the Asian market and another kind of market, because they need, of course, some contacts, and I hope we will do it. Also in the United States is something that we would like to better address in the new era, and try to find some way to collaborate with them appropriately, let's say.
Excellent. There's another question for both panelists. What is the role of cluster organizations in reshoring and rebooting global value chains? Do you need to pursue both, or is there a trade-off to consider?
Well, regarding reshoring, I think that this is very important to understand the drivers for offshoring. What were European companies looking for when they offshored their production facilities to other geographies, like China, for instance? And the fact is that in some cases, it might be eventually cheaper labor cost. So the question is, when labor cost in Europe is, let's say, $35 per hour in manufacturing, and in China is $6, maybe 20 in Shanghai, but it's quite a lot much cheaper. It's not that easy to consider reshoring. Of course, many companies are taking into account now logistics and reliability of the supply chain, etc. But I think it's not that easy to just say, okay, let's reshore. In some other cases, companies offshoring to countries like China were not just looking for cheap factors to re-export. They were looking for the local market. So again, probably the drivers or the reasons that made them manufacture there near the customer will remain. So I don't see that easy, this reshoring. There have been some discussions, and it would be very nice to think on the possibility of bringing back production here, but I think possibilities are not that huge. Of course, there are some changes in the sense of diversification of the supply and the providers, the suppliers' portfolio, and near-shoring, not necessarily reshoring to your own premises, to your own territory, but near-shoring. But I think this question has some limits because of these drivers for offshoring.
Yeah, thank you, David. Sauro.
Yeah, me too. I think that reshoring is quite complex to reasoning, because often when we think about reshoring, we think to keep the same kind of production that we have in different countries, in other countries, in foreign countries, let's say, here in our land. But I think we need to innovate the process of manufacturing. So this means that when we think, for example, to reshoring the production of some plastic components, we need to think about innovation in the plastic sector with bioplastic and some other kind of innovation, and then we can think to enable the production of those kind of materials also in our territory. And we need to think about new production plant, new factories, more flexible, able to produce different arguments in order to react to specific, let's say, needs that we can have also in the future. Of course, there are some important resources that we need. We would like to provide to our companies, because you know the demand of the new the emerging. There are no more emerging, but of the new markets in the Far East, I mean, is increasing. So this new demand probably will consume the production that they will have in their lands. So we need to think how to continue to work in our factories, and have the resources that we need. So this is very important. But I think that the innovation can help also in addressing this need, and we have to not to think just to reshoring, but we need to think about to produce in a new way with less impact in our countries, and with let's say products that can also give value to the work of our region, let's say.
Excellent, thank you. We have 2 minutes to go to the bilateral meetings, so I kindly ask you to answer very shortly to this last question from Vladimir Gumilar. It's about this meta clusters, so that these clusters that go beyond the regional cluster. What do you think? Is this something interesting to explore more, to connect with other clusters beyond the cluster boundaries and mostly internationally?
Yeah, well, sorry, Sauro.
No, it's just what I was saying before. So I fully agree with this kind of approach. So yeah, you can call it meta cluster or in a different way, but I think we have to go beyond the boundaries and try to collaborate in a cross-regional way, let's say.
Reed, something else you want to add?
Yeah, I think, of course, there is this opportunity for partnerships beyond the boundaries of the cluster, but still there is this spatial component in the cluster. It's kind of like the global concept, having this local perspective, but also this global vision.
Excellent. So thank you very much, our 2 speakers, David and Sauro. We have more questions. Some of that has to do with the session in the afternoon on how to build connections beyond the cluster. So I suggest that we continue the conversation at 2 o'clock with other 2 great speakers. Thank you very much. We have tackled many interesting things on the transformational role of clusters in these very special contexts. And I think this always looking forward style of clusters, of rethinking strategies and rethinking the role in the local ecosystem. Thank you very much again. Thank you all the participants, and I wish you fruitful conversations. See you then.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.